So I want to work out the details of my next concept. Right now, I've taken the important bits from the previous project. So I worked on the ramp or the bouncing, the rolling marble. Second, I developed the dominoes, and third, uh, unless I want a really tall vertical solution or vertical machine here, everything right now is driven by gravity. So everything is, this ball is falling from gravity, it's being influenced by gravity, and it's moving downward the whole time. I need to come up with a device that's actually going to lift this marble back up and get it ready for, some more interaction. Let gravity take over again. And so I need to build some kind of an elevator. And I can think of, off the top of my head, I can think of probably two devices, maybe even a third comes to mind. The first is going to be a spiral screw. And if so, my goal here, let me just bring up the tools, and in here somewhere, there it is, the doodle tool. What I want to do is I want to build some kind of a spiral. Okay. Let's try that again. I want to build a spiral, okay, and so I'm going to sweep a NURBS. I'm going to do a sweep NURBS. I'll probably start off with a helix that'll give me a spring shape. I'm going to sweep a surface across that, and then what I can do is I can send that into a rotation, and I feel like I can devise a device that will keep the ball from rolling backwards yet force it up. I can use some kind of rail system, I think, to lift this ball up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the little doodle that I just made. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on building an elevator. And I'm going to start off with a spline. I'll start off with a helix spline. And let me just move this up so you can see it a little bit better. The helix is effectively a spring shape, and that'll give me the screw that I want. And I'm going to change the orientation to XZ. Right, XZ. That stands the spring upright. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to change the height. I want the height to be, right now it's 200. Let me make it 1,000. Okay, that's pretty good. I can always change this once I get the strategy down. I can apply this to anything. Right now I just want to get the concept working. If I change the end rotation from 720, let's double that to 1440. So by making it 1440, it doubles the amount of rotations that are in this screw. And remember, I could do some math in here too. Instead of doing 1440, if I want to triple that, I could just do *3 and hit return. And Cinema 4D will do the math inside that field for me. Okay, but I'm going to undo that, and I'll go back to 1440. I can always change that later, but for this proof of concept, I think that's about what I want. The next thing I'm going to do is I have the spline that's going to be swept along. Now I need the surface spline that's going to get swept, and so I'll choose a rectangle. And the rectangle width, I think I'll start off with 100, and the height will be something really thin. I'll start off with 5, and I can adjust these values later. I'm going to move that up. It doesn't really matter where this is positioned because I'm going to sweep it here in just a second. But I wanted to get it up a little bit closer so I get a better sense of how that's going to scale. I think that's going to be pretty good. So let me, I'm going to go into the NURBS menu. I'm going to choose Sweep NURBS. And if I have these in the right order, I can dump both of those into the Sweep NURBS, and I get this little ribbon spiral looking thing. Now that is not what I wanted. I mean, the basic shape is there, but I'm getting all this banking, and it's kind of a cool shape. In fact, I don't know what would happen if I dropped the marble in there. I think that I could make something. I just got inspired to create another a curved ramp. So, but let me. I'm going to get back to the sweep NURBS here for a minute. With the sweep NURBS selected, if I go into the attributes, the object attributes, if I turn off banking, that's exactly what I want. So now that the rectangle is being swept continuously in the same direction all the way up to the top. And so now my goal is I need to figure out a way to get the ball onto this sweep, and so that when this rotates, to force this thing up. So I'm going to need something that's going to kind of keep it. I need to kind of keep this ball from rolling off the ramp, and I think I can introduce a couple of poles that run vertically on either side of this spiral that's going to keep the ball from rolling backwards and force it to climb up as this thing rotates. So in other words, I'm going to I want my rotation up here. I'm gonna modify the axis. I'm gonna go to the move tool. I'm just gonna lift that up. There we go. Go back to the model tool. That was just for a little bit of reference. So when I rotate this thing around, okay, my goal is that it scoops up the ball and sends it vertically up to the top where it's eventually going to get dumped to another ramp. The problem I have is that just putting the ball on here with this thing spiraling is either going to fly off or it's going to roll downhill. So my strategy is going to be, I'm going to take, this is going to take a little bit of tweaking, but what I'm going to do is, just to give you an idea here, is I'm going to take a couple of cylinders, I'm going to make them long, and I'll make them relatively narrow so that they don't interfere with this thing visually. And I'm going to move one to one side of the track, and I'm going to be a little bit more precise when I actually implement this. I'll copy and paste, and I'll put another one on the other side of the track. And once I get the size down, so I either need to make my sphere bigger, my ball bigger, or I need to make my track smaller. My goal here is I'm going to take... Let me just create a new sphere. I'm going to take a new sphere, and I'll just position this thing, and if all goes as planned, make this a little bit smaller. If my plan works out, this, once I turn on all the simulation and the physics that I need, this thing should sit right inside there. As long as I get those two rails close enough together, I suspect that this ball will sit on the surface of the screw, and as that turns, these rails are going to keep it from rolling backwards, and with any luck, this ball will go up along the y-axis. That's the goal anyway. So I'm going to tweak these things. I'm going to hit the pause button because it's going to take me a little bit to get this right, but that's the basic strategy. In fact, I think I should be able to get this pretty quickly. So I'm not going to pause. I take that back. What I am going to do is I'm going to look down. So this is just a little bit of workflow stuff here. And I'm going to rename these little cylinders. I'm going to name these pole. Okay, and I'm going to move those to the outside of the track. Now again, this is just proof of concept type stuff. So when I actually implement this, or maybe I will end up implementing this, but the marble or the ball that I'm going to use needs to be wider than these poles. So I'm going to make these adjustments now. Maybe I'll make this 70. That's actually bigger than I need, so I'm going to go back down to 60. Okay, so I'm pretty confident that when this has a rigid body, when the poles have a rigid body, and the sphere, that this will get stuck in there. Okay. I'll jump back out to my perspective view. And so I'm going to need to put a rigid body... Excuse me, I'm going to need to put colliders on all three of these objects, the sweep and the two poles, and then a rigid body on my sphere, and I think I should be in pretty good shape. So let me see what happens if I do that. Okay. So I kind of like that. A real quick experimentation. I'm going to take the sphere, I'm going to select Simulation, Dynamics, Create Rigid Body. I'm going to take the sweep NURBS, and I'm going to make that a collider, right? Because I manually want to rotate this. I don't want this to fall through space. I don't want to, I just want that to... Whoa, look at that. Okay, the ball's flying away from my sweep NURBS. Now, the reason that that's happening, if I hit the rewind button, let me move this sphere up. By default, let me hit play. Okay, it's bouncing off the sweep NURBS just fine, but by default, the collider that's being applied to this object doesn't adhere to the geometry. It adheres to the bounding box, or some kind of variation of that bounding box. And so the key is, when we're dealing with complex geometry, like in this sweep NURBS, what we need to do is we need to select the dynamics tag, we need to go to collision, and we need to change the shape of the collision from automatic to, I want to set it to moving mesh. So in other words, it's gonna calculate the actual mesh, the geometry. Now that requires some, a little bit more serious processing power, but that's okay. And so now, if I rewind the playhead, I should be able to put this sphere somewhere and not have it fly away. So we'll zoom back in. Now with any luck, okay, it doesn't fly away. Now it's rolling and it's rolling off, and it rolled through those two poles, and that's because I have not yet applied the collider to the poles. So I'm going to select both the poles. I'm going to go to Simulate, Dynamics, create Collider, and hit Rewind. With any luck, my sphere's going to get stuck. Fingers crossed. Awesome. Okay, so my sphere is stuck. All I have to do now, I think, is just rotate my elevator, rotate my screw, and I'll do that manually through animation. So I'm going to select the sweep NURBS. I'm going to go to Rotate. At frame 0, I'm going to mark the first keyframe. I'll advance the playhead, let's say, to frame 90, and I'll just do a manual animation. I'm going to rotate. Looks like negative 360 degrees. I'm going to hold down Shift to snap, and I'll mark the last keyframe. With any luck, this will rotate. Look at that, works like a champ. Okay, now I only have one rotation in there. I need to do a few things to kind of iron that out. I want to make my elevator perpetually rotate, but look at that. In 10 minutes, not to mention I paused and goofed around with a few things for a few minutes, but in less than 10 minutes I got a pretty complex animation, a little complex elevator happening here. So I have my Screw 01 elevator saved, and now I just know that I can deposit that ball right between those rails, and this thing will rotate, and as it rotates, it just kind of pushes that object up, and eventually it'll dump it off into, I'll probably introduce another ramp up here. So I'll continue to play around with that, and I'll show you the final solution here at the beginning of the next presentation.